Welcome back to the Gentleman Syndicate. Like and subscribe, of course. Continuing on with our conversation with Colton. Go ahead, sir.
So, where we left off, you were talking about how we're blurring those lines in society today about the roles of men and women, that we can, they're universal, anybody can do them. It doesn't matter about how we're made or what our responsibilities are. But what we've really seen in culture today is that there's a predominant theme of calling masculinity toxic, that the
Mm,
traditional uh, view of what it is to be a man is actually harmful to our way of thinking and to our higher ideals. What happens whenever you begin to blur those lines between what it is to be a man and what it is to be a woman is that we begin to think that because we can choose our identity, we can also choose our responsibilities. And if you can choose your responsibilities, then nobody has to be responsible. So ultimately, when we see that in the world today, we can't put our finger on it and point it out and say, hey, you're failing in your responsibilities as a man, or hey, you're failing in your responsibilities as a woman, because in culture today, it's simply no longer proper to assume that men should act like men and that women should act like women. So, in resurrecting what the role of a man is and what the role should be of a father in the home, uh, is really fundamental to seeing some healing with regards to our society and our church going forward.
I fully agree with that, and that kind of leads us into, the role of a father, right? Uh, my father, love him, super hard dude growing up. Accountability was his thing. He grew up in the military. I'd have to every Sunday night, make sure all my clothes are lined up for Monday through Friday, ironed, ready to go. You know what I'm saying? Like he ran a tight ship. He was military, and he grew up, he's from Alabama, deep in the country, running around barefoot. Love him, man. I've learned so much from him. And honestly, I learned a lot leading up to, me stepping out of his home and the home, but I learned even more after I had my kids. You know what I mean? I find myself, hey
Yeah.
pops, yo, how do I deal with this? I'm going through this with my now ex-wife. I don't know what to say. And people that know him are like, oh, he's such a nice guy, loving, boom, boom, boom. But when it came to me, he held me accountable. Like, you know what I mean? He would tell me like it is, because that's the world that we live in. Men men don't we talk very straight to the point, like, hey, you're messing up because X, Y, and Z. There's not a lot of fluff in what it is. And that puts us as men, looking inward, right? And when we deal with our problems. And so the role of my father in my life has given me so much capacity to be able to handle a lot of the things that I've dealt with. And my mom too, she was a super strong woman as well. But for this point, I'm talking about the father. My father was the one that helped raise me to help raise my kids, and
Yeah.
be able to instill some certain things with them. And like I said, I still call him to this day, asking him questions, and he's just a well of wisdom, right? Because that's what fathers are, men are, grandfathers. My kids call my dad Opa. So um, a well of wisdom from the things that they've learned throughout their life. And so, what's some of the positive impacts that you're seeing, or you have seen, or you know of the roles of father?
It's really hard. In fact, I think there's no way to overstate the positive impacts of a father in a child's life. Some of what you were just talking about, and this is just practical. Maybe this doesn't sound particularly educational or intellectual, but it was always the dad that came along the children and said, "Hey, be tough. Like
Yeah.
there are some things that hurt that you just have to bear." And the core tenet of what it is to be a man is sacrifice, cost. You work, you sacrifice so that your family doesn't have to. so that your wife and your children are able to grow in a safe environment, learn and discover themselves without having to foot the bill about where's their food going to come from? Are they going to be safe? Are they going to have a roof over their head? And really, whenever you begin to say it's not okay to teach people how to be tough, well, you're shooting yourself in the foot because you're also at that same um, at your own peril. You're not teaching them just what it is to be tough anymore, what it is to bear under a burden of something when it's hard and you don't really have a reason why you should keep going. And that's pretty fundamental. Other than what we've talked about prisoners and the overwhelming statistics about recidivism, what happens, how often somebody is just kept in the system all their life because they have no father to guide them. Ultimately, having a father is more about knowing that we have someone who will unconditionally support us. They won't leave us. They are that wealth of wisdom. They are that life spring where we go back to when you're in life and you don't know what to do. Where do you go? You go to dad.
Oh yeah.
You say, Dad, this is what I'm walking through. And what children see as they get older is that dad begins to tell them stories about things they didn't know about. But
Yeah,
he can't
yeah.
tell them those things when they're kids. They have to grow older. They have to taste it. They have to get to a place in life where they're actually able to receive that wisdom and that testimony that he's got for them. And when they get it, they understand, well, I can see why you didn't tell me this when I was 8 or 9 years old. But it is a gem. It is the very life giving piece of advice that they need when they're 16 or when they're 18 or when they're 21 and they have a young family, or when they're 30 and they're having a midlife crisis. And that's what we see is without a father in place just to kind of come alongside them, there's really nowhere for them to get their understanding of faithfulness. So all of those things, all of what a dad has to offer as a role of a father in the home, those things are really established at a fundamental level before we're ever able to understand or explain what they are. So when you see a culture and a people saying, oh, you don't need a dad because you can get these things from a mom, or when you see a culture trying to explain to teenagers, oh, well, here's what you didn't have, but here's why you don't need it. Um, those things are a felt loss in a child, in an adolescent, in a teenager. They are a felt loss before they're ever able to understand gender arguments or replacement theory. You can't explain to a kid why they don't need what they never had because they simply grow up feeling mourning this loss of something they simply did not have. Explaining those things away when they get older doesn't heal the wounds of what they were missing from not having a dad. And I think that kind of gets into the big picture of what you're trying to say here, which is what do we do about it? What do we do to combat that?
Yeah, I think you might have heard me say it. I had a buddy of mine, his name's Sean. I talked to him sometime from time to time at work. Uh, he kind of pointed out one of the things I've said, the greatest multiplication for men is subtraction. And what that means is when we go through those tough times, when we go through those hard times, the people that we thought were there, around that table that were sharing in our life at the high peak of our lives, when it's dark and it's lonely, they're not there, and that process of the pain towards, the progress of growth. Um, our Father, referring to him, when we're alone and we're dealing with all the different traumatic things or things that we're dealing with, he's looking to us and say, hey, look up. There's nobody else around you. You're looking out. I need you to look up because I'm going to lead you through this darkness. I'm going to lead you through this pain because all you need is me. And the value of that role of the Father in our lives, regardless if we have the Father out here, is he's trying to lead us, which becomes the representation of us leading the home and our wives and the children. That is the purpose being tough. That is the purpose of growing through pain, of having to deal with it. Lobsters can't become lobsters until they break out of their shell. They can't grow to be bigger until they break out of their shell. You know what I mean? They have to have pressure. We have to have pressure as men. That's why, God said, you're going to labor out in the fields, and she's going to strike at the heel of man because she wants to be the head of man. Right? Like, that's biblical. And you can confirm that, I refer to you for all biblical context, right? But all of those things is to say that the role of the father is to go out there and put the pressure, is to be the sacrificial one for the family unit, because Jesus showed us that. Jesus lived that. He walked that line, sacrifice his life. He defeated death, right? So he showed us what sacrificial love is, and some of the greatest leadership that you're ever going to hear. And it's crazy how any of this, probably in the past 20 to 25 years, only started being known as this, but it's called servant leadership. Servant leadership is a a flair word that somebody made money off of, in the early 2000s. But guess what? That servant leadership's been here over 2,000 years in the Bible. Once they found the Dead Sea Scrolls and they scripted it all together, servant leadership has been the foundation of what men's roles are and what fathers are to be for sons. And sometimes I remember before I joined the military, I was doing a lot of stuff on the street, right? And my dad was going to call the cops on me one time because I was doing something in the garage. He laughs to this day. I laugh about it now, but I was doing something that I definitely wasn't supposed to have been doing, and he was like, if you don't get that out of here, but he didn't say those words, get that out of here, I'm calling the cops. And I was like, what? It was one of those that lack of support of my stupidity was something that I needed to hear from him, to be like, oh, wow, there's a consequence for, what I'm doing. And my dad ain't supporting it. I went to jail once, and I talked to him now, and he's like, yeah, you knew not to call me. I was going to let you sit in there. And I was like, yeah, you're right. That's why I didn't call you. You know what I'm saying? I called my boys. Hey, dog, I can't, you know what I mean? Hey, I left the key here. I need you to do this. Boom, boom, boom. And so, but that's what fathers are to do, right? And teaching us and growing us and allowing us to feel that pressure. And they relieve the pressure not by removing the pressure, by poking holes in the thinking of dealing with that pressure. Because we as men look inward when we deal with pain and suffering and traumatic experiences, and we kind of detach ourselves from other men, and look at it today, right? Boys becoming men are not attached to the father. They're becoming detached from the father. We as fathers, husbands and men, need to start realigning and connecting with other kingdom-minded men to start reforming that bond that we're supposed to have, because the body of Christ is you had a testimony, or I think it was 2 Sundays ago, you had a ministry about, the body of Christ and what that is and how that is. And we should be doing the same thing with other men. And that's why I got to this channel. And that's how I got to this channel, and how we kind of are talking about this, and the role of fathers. And we have to stay connected with the father, whether it's other fathers across from us, outside of us, but always connected with him up there. Staying connected with that is what we have to do, I believe, to start rebuilding the foundation of accountability, of the responsibilities that we have as men, as fathers, and the sacrifice that we're supposed to do. My dad wouldn't, if I was doing something stupid, all right, you messed up. Well, I'm going to support you in recovering from this, but you're going to learn your lesson from the X, Y, and Z, right? So, God lets us go through things to strip us from the things that we thought we were holding on to of this world, and let us know, like, he's the one. It's always been him, it's always been him in that role of saying, hey, I'm the one, I'm going to pull you. So This has been awesome, and I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but yeah.
Yeah, very, very quickly, just to show how what you're saying is the main thing. It is the whole point of what we came to talk about is that to be independent as a man does not mean to be alone.
Yep.
That was never the model. And servant leaders is what we were called to be. Jesus gave us the model of what it is to be a man. And if we look at who Jesus Christ was, it kind of flies in the face of what traditionally we were taught being a man was. But if we can have our cake and eat it too, so to speak, if we can really embody all of the qualities of responsibility, sacrifice, service, leadership, boundary setting, authority, if we will live up to that while at the same time not throwing out things like understanding and compassion and affection for our family, if we can lead them without being domineering or commanding, but lead them as a sense of follow me, what we'll get is all of those rewards that have been taken away from manhood, all of the perks of what it is to be a man, so to speak, while also garnering the respect of those that we're leading. And I think really that's killing two birds with one stone. We release ourselves from the burden of having to be alone, figuring it out on our own, doing it on our own, making a plan, and then making it happen. Because it becomes a community among other men, and it becomes a family with our family, while at the same time we get all of those things that we strived so hard for before, while always losing. So I think that's really the main point. Whenever we have a felt experience like that of what a fulfilled family is, when we have a felt experience of what it is to have a complete church, a complete brotherhood of men, all we really have to do is embody those qualities. We don't have to try and convince people. We don't have to go out and start this big ad campaign. All we have to do is embody those qualities ourselves, and it speaks for itself. Truth is self evident. When women and children see us acting like men, when they feel us taking up the mantle while still loving and serving them, they have a felt experience that is true and complete. And there's no need for us to explain or champion why what we do is the right way of doing it. They will simply see for themselves. Actions speak louder than words. And a society full of fathers that are engaged in their traditional role is a society that is healthy, safe, and faithful.
Couldn't have been said any other way. That's spot on, because I had something to say, but you said it better. You know, yeah, women help us to feel, men help us to understand what doing is. Uh, so I 100% believe that at the core, and it's awesome being able to share in this journey of understanding and breaking down some of those things from the biblical context, from experiential context, and using this platform. So again, like and subscribe to the channel, to the Gentleman's Syndicate. The link is below, to the Christian Church of San Angelo Facebook link as well. Pastor Colton Bradshaw